Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio, and this is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C., and it's our Thanksgiving program. And this, of course, is based on an executive order from the Lincoln administration. I think the story usually goes that it was written by Seward, but it declared a national Thanksgiving. It's based on the older Harvest Festival tradition coming from England and other places. But it's now Thanksgiving for what? For winning the Battle of Gettysburg. And let's always keep that in mind. That's what you're celebrating, that the Union prevailed on the terrible field of Gettysburg. And let me just get ahead of all the other arguments for this week. If you know the Civil War, there is one, the American Civil War, or indeed anyone, but the American one in particular, rather bigger than most. If you know Civil War, there's one overwhelming conclusion, and it's not a matter of detail. I happen to be one of the leading Civil War scholars. My lecture on the Russian fleets is, of course, the most popular video on C-SPAN in their archive in this entire season of the 150th anniversary. I seem to be still leading. And here's my finding. Never again, never again, never again. Anybody who talks about Civil War is a madman. Put him in the clink. Put him in the booby hatch. The loony bin. No. And this now means Senator Tom Coburn, United States Senator from Oklahoma, outgoing, now being replaced by this Lankford character, maybe even worse. Tom Coburn yesterday said on the eve of Obama's statement on immigration that the United States was now threatened by anarchy and violence. I'm sorry, when a senator says this, this is a threat. Coburn is threatening the United States government with anarchy and violence. This is sedition. Now, I'm sure Senator Coburn would argue that he's protected. He can say whatever he wants under the famous speech and debate clause of the Constitution, and that, of course, is a powerful thing. But are there limits? For example, if you advocate the violent overthrow of the government, you can be prosecuted under the Smith Act, provided that this is a direct incitement. It's got to be like crying fire in a crowded theater. Does Coburn's anarchy and violence speech add up to that? I don't know. How about the wraparound law? If you cross state lines with the goal of creating a riot, could you be hit with the wraparound law? Could Coburn? I don't know. General Sherman, about 150 years ago, was marching to the sea, putting down that last unfortunate rebellion. General Sherman, I think, would have known how to deal with Coburn. But today, it's harder. However, with Coburn has now joined the Civil War caucus. So far, who do we find there? Glenn Beck, articulating the eternal Mormon position of civil war against the United States. And, of course, Michael Savage, a different breed of reactionary or worse. And the worse. When do you cross from being a reactionary to fascism? What's the dividing line? Well, a reactionary works for reactionary policies. We've been talking about them for years here. But does it more or less maintaining the formal legalisms of a legal system? The fascist does it by violence, by armed gangs, by extra legal force, right? Beating up smashing trade union headquarters, destroying media outlets, their offices and facilities and transmitters and presses and whatever that the fascist doesn't like. So essentially, when you go from being a reactionary to being a fascist, when you start mixing in violence, armed gangs, some of the Republicans getting uncomfortably close to that. And just to add the other important element, I think, of this current situation, if we can find the reference here. Today, we have in the Washington Post a report of yet another Obama security incident, and that's the following. Washington Post of today being Friday, November 21st, 2014, Carol Leonig, headline, Woman near White House with a handgun is arrested. A Michigan woman was arrested by Secret Service officers after she was seen walking along the White House's north fence with a handgun at about 8 p.m. She was there on the perimeter. She was arrested for having an unregistered 9mm handgun in her holster. She was wearing a holster walking around the White House. As soon as I heard 9mm, I thought, my God, it's Senator-elect Joni Ernst of Iowa. But it turned out not to be Senator-elect Ernst. It turned out to be April Lenhart, 23, accompanied by another person. Oh, my God, she had a handler. She had a minder. That guy was questioned and then released. And he was not, his name was not released by the Secret Service. So during the immigration speech, she was walking around the White House at the time of Obama's address to the nation inside the East Room. She was arrested just minutes after he concluded. What kind of a situation is this? This is yet another warning to Obama on various issues. And I think this has gone too far. I was relieved that it wasn't Senator Joni Ernst with her 9mm. She's from the 9mm Smith & Wesson party, okay? The Smith Act, the wraparound law, there are other laws. A real government would use them. Now, as people know, Obama made his speech about immigration. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'd like to talk about international affairs first. Is this question, which we have been attempting to deal with now, is there a policy review in the Obama administration about Syria? And you'll remember that we identified that last week. The notion of a policy review was being used as a cloak by warmonger forces inside the administration to try to bootleg in the actual bombing. And we know that's the modus operandi of Skull and Bones Kerry going back several months now, actually a year back to June of right after the fall of Qusair, Syria, back in June of 2013. He came into a meeting of the deputies, the principals, whatever they call themselves, in the National Security Council, and he said we should start bombing Syria right away. And at that point, Dempsey was there to say no, but unfortunately things have gone downhill. I would identify a warmonger cabal which looks like this. It's John McCain, of course, with Lindsey Graham, but also Hillary Clinton, Robert Gates, he's got his shooting his mouth off again, Leon Panetta, General David Petraeus, General John Allen, who's back in the administration, all the neocon think tanks, the AEI, the Institute for the Study of War, the Kagan Family Party, Robert Kagan, Kim Kagan, Frederick Kagan, with Kerry and Samantha on the inside working with them. That's the warmonger cabal, and they don't give up. And they're supported by powerful outside forces. Let's just give a couple of examples on that. Last week, right? Just no sooner had our broadcast of last week gone up that we found in the Washington Post a big article on the front page about how the warmonger forces were attempting to use the time that Obama was out of town. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, our Thanksgiving edition. Happy Thanksgiving to all. And it's a wonderful holiday, and we're all for it, and we're celebrating that the Battle of Gettysburg turned out the way it did. Don't ever forget that part, because without that, the abundance would not have been there. And, of course, one of the issues there in the Civil War was, would the U.S. be a low-wage economy, including slavery, or would it be a high-wage economy? Unfortunately, for a while, the high-wage economy won out. But since then, that has been called back into question again by all of these neo-Confederates running around, right? And here we are. It's the Gettysburg Thanksgiving and the 150th anniversary of Sherman's march to the sea. And very soon we'll be getting into the final battles, the apocalyptic final phase of the war in the West, meaning the Mississippi Valley, the defeat of the Confederates at Franklin by Schofield, and then the annihilation of Hood's Confederate Army at the Battle of Nashville in December. And some guy contacted me a few years ago. He was part of the pro-Hood Memorial Society. So I have to say, I can't really have anything to do with that because this is so much against my values. Thomas, how the Rock of Chickamauga became the sledgehammer of Nashville, from Virginia. And we have another good Virginian on the list this week. We have John Marshall, the great Chief Justice, who shows us that the purpose of this government is to promote the general welfare. And we'll get to that, too, if we can. Otherwise, I refer you to my interview with Tom Kiley yesterday on INN World Report. But as I was saying, on Saturday of last week, a week ago when you're hearing this for the first time, U.S. weighs CIA aid to Syrian fighters. Accelerating training and weapons assistance would fill the gap as the similar Pentagon program takes shape. So in other words, the idea of training the so-called Free Syrian Army, non-existent, subliminal man there, non-existent, but in the meantime, the CIA should try. So right now, with Obama out of town, we see the schemers, and I smell Allen and Petraeus. The Obama administration has been weighing plans to escalate the CIA's role in arming and training fighters in Syria, a move aimed at accelerating covert U.S. support to moderate rebel factions, non-existent, while the Pentagon is preparing to establish its own training bases. Now, this is interesting in itself that they say this. The problem, of course, is we're told that one group has already gotten TOW missiles. Light arms, one group called Harakat Hazm, H-A-Z-M, was among a select group of units to be given U.S.-made TOW anti-tank missiles. But then we find that some of them have been overrun and they've taken the weapons. The latest setback came this month when CIA-backed factions were routed by Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. Fighters with militia, including Harakat Hazm, one of the biggest recipients of U.S. arms, fled positions in towns across northern Syria while leaving many of their U.S.-supplied weapons to be scooped up by Jabhat al-Nusra. And that's Harakat Hazm that got these TOW missiles that are now in the hands of al-Nusra. Isn't that enough? But then, at the end of the article, what do we find? Who's quoted? Marine Corps General John R. Allen, the administrator's coordinator for the Syria and Iraq coalition. Here we call him the ISIS czar. In an interview with Al Jazeera last month, he said there's going to be fighting in Syria that we cannot necessarily predict. That's putting it mildly, General. The hope is, he says, U.S.-trained forces will be able to hold their own against Assad, against Nusra, and other groups. We're dealing with the ISIS component first because we must. They're a threat to our allies. They're a threat to us. Well, fire this guy. Fire him. He's a security risk. I have put out a statement last week about this. Fire Allen. He's compromised. He's a security risk. After those dealings with Jill Kelly, La Libanaise, this Lebanese woman, who knows what she represents? God knows. He was engaging in a tremendously intense email commerce with her. He's been investigated. The Pentagon Inspector General whitewashed him like they whitewashed everything in the past 20 years. No, out, fire him. Let him join, once again, Petraeus in disgrace outside of the military. And now here we go, another very, very interesting aspect. Today's editorial, let's see if we can find it. Sorry, it's not today. It's Wednesday. Wednesday, November 19th. Top editorial, leading editorial, Washington Post. Here we have Gates, once again, of the warmonger clique, saying that you will not be able to seriously degrade Islamic State without special operations forces on the ground. Petraeus comes from special operations. Obama gave them the mission to destroy ISIS, but when you then deny the military the authorities they require to achieve the objective, you leave them with a great sense of frustration. Well, I'm sorry, Gates. We have traditional civilian control over the military. General Grant got his orders from President Lincoln, and that's a good system. Now, the Washington Post helpfully adds, it's not just the generals who are chafing, but U.S. allies, including Turkey and Qatar, are increasingly uncomfortable with Obama's strategy of training the moderate Syrian rebels in the hope that they will fight the Islamic State but not weaken Bashar. I'm sorry here. Erdogan is a figure of treachery. The Emir of Qatar embodies treachery. We are chafing here. We are chafing. We are really uncomfortable here that Turkey and Qatar continue to support ISIS in every way, with logistics, with the border, with crazies coming in, right? Recruiting of the crazies. Check what Taradawi says about ISIS on the Arabic language edition of Al Jazeera, not Al Jazeera America, with all those familiar worn faces from CNN, but Taradawi. And here's the interesting thing that takes us, I think, to a new level. Obama was asked, "Are you actively discussing ways to remove Assad?" Mr. Obama's response was a blunt no. Did you hear that? No, we are not actively discussing ways to remove Assad. Now, we had denials from Ben Rhodes last week. We had a number of denials about this policy review that was supposed to lead to the bombing of Assad when Obama was out of town. We took this back to Avril Harriman. We took it back to Al Gore. Harriman, of course, giving the signal for the coup that killed the Diem brothers in South Vietnam in 1963. We had Al Gore bombing Serbia in 1999. They tried it again, and they failed, and Obama said, no. We'll give you that in detail now in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, you've got to keep up with Tarpley.net, Tarpley.net. A lot is happening. And through Tarpley.net, you can see the Twitter feed, Webster G. Tarpley, minute by minute, hour by hour. Keep in touch. Get marching orders. You want to know what to do? You want to know how to intervene in the world? We'll be glad to facilitate that. And we are grateful for the attention and support that we have received, right? The Twitter feed is approaching 17,500 followers, I guess. Followers, people who want to stay in touch. That's not my term. That's their term. Obama and Syria. So there has been this drive to use these trips, right? The trip to Beijing, to Burma, and to the G20 in Brisbane, Australia. And they tried to get bombing going when he was out of town. And his response is no. Now, the Washington Post was complaining about that on Wednesday, November 19th. Let's go and see the underlying article, which our intelligence service here has found for us. And this is at the Convention and Exhibition Center, Brisbane, Australia, on November 16th, earlier this week in the afternoon, as Obama was getting ready to leave. So it's a question series from Kristen Welker, and she wants to know about Syria. And the question she's asking, is there in fact a policy review? And again, that had been denied by Ben Rhodes. Now it's going to be denied by Obama. So that should be pretty clear. She says, Kristen Welker, question to Obama. Are you currently recalibrating your policy in Syria? Does that include plans to remove Bashar al-Assad? Was it a miscalculation not to attack Assad earlier? Thank you. Okay, Obama says, I think he's saying, I watch this stuff very carefully. I'm watching you putschist, golpisti officers in the U.S. military, you seditious, insubordinate generals of the Petraeus stripe. We have a weekly meeting with my CENTCOM commander, says Obama, with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, with all our diplomatic personnel related to the region, as well as my national security team, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, intelligence team, to assess what kind of progress we are making both in Iraq and Syria in respect to ISIL. I will be having weekly meetings as long as this campaign, the ISIS campaign, lasts, because I think it's important to get it right. We have not had a comprehensive review of Syria, but we have had a comprehensive review on everything every week, what's working and what's not. We have not changed our attitude with respect to Bashar al-Assad. Fine, he doesn't like Assad. He thinks he's not a good president and all this stuff. Question again, follow-up from Kristen Welker. But just to put a fine point on it, are you actively discussing ways to remove Assad as part of that political transition? Answer from Obama, no. Therefore, lunatics out there who are drooling to attack Obama, why don't you attack the greater warmongers? Obama is certainly bad enough, whatever you want to say. But why not attack McCain, as we've been doing with our Arrest McCain for ISIS with a hashtag or a diesis, the famous sharp in front of it, right? Sharp, Arrest McCain for ISIS. Why don't you attack those people? Why not attack the people on this list? McCain, Lindsey Graham, Hillary Clinton, Robert Gates, Leon Panetta, David Petraeus, very important. General Allen, I think, is the main schemer. I think General Allen, as ISIS czar, he's one of the most dangerous people in the world. The entire neocon group, Kerry of Skull and Bones and Samantha, the humanitarian bomber. Why don't you attack them? Why are you attacking Obama? What is this? We see the various crackpot websites. You got to impeach Obama or the world will end on such and such a date. I would prefer to identify with the use of intelligence and reality-based criteria who the actual warmongers are that might be bigger. So why not attack a bigger warmonger rather than a lesser one? And again, Obama, bad enough on a number of topics. However, there's also this, and we can't really solve this one right now. President Putin of Russia this week has made a statement according to which cooperation between the Russian Federation and the United States is possible. Возможно. I am absolutely for it, and therefore we've got to find the ways. Now, I don't think Putin would be saying something like that into the teeth of a roaring gale coming from the loud traps of McCain or Lindsey Graham or such people. I think there may be something underneath. Maybe Obama has figured out some things, right? Maybe he's figured out something. So the other interesting aspect of this is Turkey. Here we have the Washington Post expects us to be concerned about the tender sensibilities of the Erdogan regime of Turkey. Well, I want to know about Serena Shim. I was on Press TV of Iran a month ago, around the time, October 19th, when Serena Shim was, it looks like, murdered in Turkey after receiving a death threat from the Turkish intelligence. And again, I always speak with great sadness as a friend of Turkey, having been there in the 1980s and met virtually the entire political class. Naturally, my Turkey is the Turkey of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and his entire program, which I regard as exemplary. But the killing of Serena Shim points to something very different and very ugly. Serena Shim killed when her car was hit by a piece of earth-moving equipment. If we go back to, let's say, the death of the Austrian politician Georg Haider, many years ago now, almost a decade, we will see that Haider was also apparently killed by a piece of earth-moving equipment. That is, at any rate, the estimate of my friend Gerhard Wisniewski. So we'd have to look into this, but this looks extremely suspicious. The OSCE is there. We're interested in the OSCE these days because we want them to act on, to condemn the United States in the case of Reverend Pinckney and some other human rights cases. But the OSCE is there, and they should really be probing the Erdogan people, Davutoglu, and unfortunately the U.S. NATO networks and the Turkish intelligence. So we are always on the verge of someone of this group. I think, again, Allen right now is the biggest candidate that I can see, using their position to act behind the scenes. And the fact that that woman was arrested at the White House with that weapon during Obama's immigration speech, to me, points to the fact that he is still being threatened, and that this is a absolutely intolerable situation. Why don't you get indignant about that, all you people out there, especially the ones who used to claim some intellectual credentials, right, which obviously don't exist. Now, let's talk about immigration. I refer you on the immigration question to the summary I provided with the help of kind help of Tom Kiley, INN World Report, done yesterday. That is to say, the Thursday, the 20th. Also, Coburn. We've dealt with Coburn. What is the underlying reality? Well, the United States workforce. Remember that all of the other principal economic problems have severe dislocations, severe demographic problems. Russia, the life expectancy is falling. China, terrible results of one-child family. EU getting old and getting old. U.S. escapes. Why? Because of Latinos, they're immigrants. So be glad of a Trump card. Back in a minute. World Crisis Radio. Keep up with everything at Tarpley.net, and Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. Buy some of those books for Christmas giving. It's time. The holiday season approaches. So the future of the U.S. workforce, we need these people. That's very clear. And the fact that they're willing to come here is a great advantage. I would invite you to carry out a thought experiment. Suppose everybody in Latin America wanted to go to China or the Russian Federation. Suppose they wanted to go to the European Union. You could say, hey, let's go to Spain where we speak the language and we'll make a new life there. Under those conditions, the United States situation would become, in some ways, almost hopeless, because those reactionary white voters that have not provided enough children for the country, right? They have not given the fatherland enough kids. They would dominate more and more. But above all, the working class, the workforce, would become decimated. And if the Latinos wanted to go someplace else, that would really mean that the United States would be in a tremendous disadvantageous position as far as even national survival were concerned. So be glad that Latinos, Asians, and others want to come here. It's some kind of residual merit that the United States seems to have. Again, a lot of it is based on past performance rather than current upward mobility, but nevertheless, there it is. Embrace it. Hold on to that with both hands and your teeth. Make such people feel welcome. There's an exemplary program here in the city of Baltimore where they said, we're going to be depopulated. We better make people feel welcome. Stop with this vindictive stuff. And the most absurd, that would be that you can't have food stamps, you can't have Medicaid, you can't have Obamacare. Absolutely absurd, vindictive, Calvinistic in the extreme. And we are told now from various accounts that there have been, a lot of celebrations in the Latino, but also a sense of bitterness among the Latinos because it doesn't go far enough. And I understand the Obama reason for this is that you have to do what is legal in the form of an executive order, right? You cannot indeed change laws, but you can change the administration or the enforcement of those laws to reflect different priorities. And I think that part is fine. But there are all kinds of workers, men who have come to this country from Central, South America, Mexico, who were sending money back to their families. They kept their families there. They worked here. They're not covered. There are lots of other people, right? There are all sorts of other categories, right? Probably about 60% of the undocumented immigrant community is not covered. And even those that are can't get these elementary basic assistance of food stamps and Medicaid and so forth. I would ask you seriously, no matter how blinded you are by hatred, racism, and prejudice, in the age of Ebola, let's say, do you really want to take a large number, 6 or 7 million, or 12 or 14 or 20 million, and say you're not allowed to have Medicaid, you're not allowed to have any even basic medical care? We have to come to realize that the line of defense of the human species is the human species. We do not want any diseases of epidemic potential making the leap from the animal kingdom or any other part of the biosphere into our own human ranks, because, of course, once it's among people, then it spreads more rapidly. I would think that even the most benighted, raving, racist Republican, the most bigoted, would be able to understand that. But apparently not. Now, remember the safeguards. My safeguards, 15 15ths. 15 15ths. It's a fraction. You can draw it, right? 15 over 15ths. 15 15ths. The 15 is $15 minimum wage, living wage. Put a floor under the ability of anybody to undercut your salary. So if you're a blue-collar worker at a low level of pay, you have a legitimate beef if the Latino comes and takes your job away by working for a very low wage. Let's at least put a floor under that. I would hope to raise it, but you get the idea. The other thing is increase the demand for labor inside the United States by doing the obvious. A 15% protective tariff. I call it a protective tariff. In the old days, that would have been a revenue tariff, but in today's world, it certainly would function as a protective tariff. So $15 minimum wage, 15% protective tariff, and the THS is Taft-Hartley shutdown. Shut down the Taft-Hartley law that cripples the union movement by allowing southern states and other oligarchical states, Michigan now, to join the union-busting ranks. No, no, no. We want to go back to the Wagner Act of the New Deal, not the Taft-Hartley Act of the post-war, passed over Truman's veto. At least he fought on that one. Shut it down. So 15 15ths, $15 minimum wage, 15% protective tariff, and Taft-Hartley shutdown. You do those three things, you're already on the right track. Now, of course, my program remains seize the Fed, open up that $5 trillion infrastructure window, 30 million new productive jobs. One programmatic novelty this week is, after having looked at the details on the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration, I would certainly call now for not 5 million, but 10 million emergency summer jobs for youth who are having a hard time breaking into the labor market to begin with. That would be number one. Now, the other side of this is political. Even on NPR today, France 24, I'm sorry, he said, this is the first presidential thing that Obama has ever done. After 6 years of cowardice and cringing and conflict avoidance, Obama seems to have stopped momentarily repeating this garbage that he's been telling us for so many years, that he was going to be bipartisan and post-partisan and that he could reach across the aisle. This is absolutely insane. And it was simply cowardice, right, in the face of these people, right, who are now claiming that they wanted to be friends with Obama. It's ridiculous. So maybe Obama, maybe miracles have not ceased, and Obama is actually able to understand that fighting is better. Scratch a bully and you find a coward. Scratch a bully, you will find a coward. Hannity, Limbaugh. If Obama gets the virtues of fighting, the sky's the limit. Here's what I saw in this entire thing. The Republicans are not energized. They claim they're going to go bonkers. They claim they're going to go crazy. What I see is the Republican consultants are tamping down the lunatics. It was very hard to get any Republican of any note to come out last night. Who did Hannity get? He got Bachmann. She's on her way out. King. This is his issue. Ted Cruz yesterday was quoting Cicero's oration against Catiline. Cruz should go and look up, I'm sure he does not know, how Cicero ended up, and maybe he should back off and not be quoting Catiline quite so much. But the idea is that as has been pointed out, the main Republican worry yesterday was not what Obama would do, but how many damaging quotes, how many racist, xenophobic pieces of sound bites would come out of the mouths of these Republicans, right? The lunatic caucus of the Republican Party. As of today, Friday, the 21st, the Republicans have all left town. They're all gone. They ran for cover like rabbits. They couldn't run away fast enough. They did not want to be quoted. They did not want to be on TV, right? Mad Cow was saying she tried to get Republicans to come on. None of them would. Costa, it's an interesting story. I'll tell it after the interviews. Robert Costa used to work for the National Review. Now he works for the Washington Post. He uses his old contacts. So we know what the Republicans are thinking. They are running scared, except for the absolute lunatics. Back in a minute. Welcome once